No, aren't I lovely?
Do you mind?
Headache?
Worse, a sinus headache. Pain and pressure around my eyes.
That's bad.
Try this.
Sign up?
It works for me.
Introducing Sinoff, a new sinus medicine that quickly relieves headache, pain, and pressure while it helps clear the congestion causing it. New Sinoff, because there's more to sinus pain than just a headache.
BCTV! Our best show.
Good morning. My first guest this morning is Ms. Maureen McTeer, the wife of the former Prime Minister of Canada, and I'm sure she hopes to be the wife again of the same man as Prime Minister of Canada. But I suspect that she's not here to talk politics. She's here to talk about houses she has lived in, the grace and favour houses of the high and mighty in Ottawa, and her book called Residencies. Then I'm going to have another stab at trying to help us understand the agony of Ireland with Sidney Callahan, a Methodist minister from Belfast, and I'm sure he's got nothing ahead, perhaps, but prognostications of doom and gloom. Later in the program, a progress report on a very sad story. 2 years ago today, I had Marjorie Shaw on the air telling us about the theft of her children. Our children are still missing. There they are, and with her in the studio today to update us on how it's almost impossible to find these children is her lawyer, Rick Rhodes, with Marjorie Shaw. But first, grace and favour with Ms. McTeer after the break. See the commercials. Makes life a lot easier.
There is a...
My instant inclination, interviewing Maureen McTeer, the wife of the former Prime Minister of Canada, is of course to launch into a political diatribe. Will you get into politics with me at all, Maureen?
Only as it concerns the book.
Only as it concerns the book.
That's right.
Next question to get it out of the way. Have you taken any notice of some of the nasty, if not shabby, remarks made about your handling of the official residencies by another author who shall remain nameless?
No.
And you won't comment about that either?
That's right.
So what are we going to talk about this morning?
Well, we're not talking about politics. We could talk about law.
Law.
We could talk about the book.
You are, of course, a lawyer. We could talk about the book. We could talk about what I call these grace and favour houses.
Yes.
Now, you're well qualified. Why to talk about these three houses?
Because I did my homework. I did my research, and I lived in all the three houses, so it gives a rather different look at the insides.
24 Sussex Drive, and for which you lived in a short but presumably happy 9 months.
Certainly short.
Certainly short, and presumably happy. Politically, you were happy at that particular time, I'm quite sure.
Well, politically, it was good for Joe.
It was tough. Tell me about Sussex Drive. First of all, when you moved into Sussex Drive and decided to change the furnishings and whatnot, do you, as the Prime Minister's wife, have a blank check to do as you wish, to remove other furnishings and put in yours?
Well, there are certain pieces of furniture that are already there, and I think one of the things that we had tried to do when we went in was I worked with two architects, Cecilia Humphreys and Maureen Lonergan, her sister, who were both architects from Manitoba, one living in Ottawa. We had gone in and decided that one of the things we would like to do, or one of the things I really wanted to do, was make it a showplace of Canadian things. So we began to, on the first floor, do the history of Canada, if you will, through sculptures and art and furnishings, books and that kind of thing. So that's how we began to proceed. And so we tried to integrate what we had as our own private things, our own pieces of art, our own furniture, with what was there. And then from that, we decided what we needed.
Tell me about Sussex Drive, though. How long has it been there? I've been there once for a very stilted, formal dinner, way back in the days when Lalonde was a mere office boy. No kidding. And Pearson was the Prime Minister.
That's right.
And it struck me it's not a terribly impressive house as you walk in the front door. Is it really?
Well, I guess a lot depends on I like to think that a house gives off a feeling of the residents that are there, so that when you come in to a house, you can have an idea just what type of people are living there, whether they're warm, whether...
And how did you leave it? What type
How
of
did
people?
we leave it?
Yes.
I think we left it with that kind of feeling. We tried to treat, it's a very elegant home, we tried to treat it with the elegance it deserved, but also to have certain types of artwork, sculptures, and so on that really reflected us.
Who first lived in 24 Sussex?
It was built in 1867 for a lumber baron, who was the first member of Parliament for the riding of Ottawa when Canada became a country in 1867.
Probably cost about $20,000 at
15.
most. 15. I wasn't far out, was it?
Yes, no, you weren't. He built it as an engagement gift to his third wife. His first
His
two wives died very tragic deaths, and 3 of his small children had died of scarlet fever in 10 days of each other.
What was his name?
Joseph Merrill Currier, an American by birth, who had come and made his fortune in the lumber industry. And he gave it to his third wife on condition that it would be built on a cliff overlooking the water and the trees that had made his fortune, and that it would be called Gorfisfa, which is a mispronunciation of the Welsh word, which means resting place, or more literally, place of peace. So we
Give me
would
that
have
again.
Oh, don't ask me to spell.
Yeah.
Gorfisfa is how I pronounce it.
Gorfisfaz.
Yeah. No S.
No, it's Gorfisfa.
Yeah.
So there we have 24 Sussex Drive. Is it a happy house?
I think it is, when we go into places, we like to make them our own place, our own space, if you will. It's the only private place that people in public office have, so they become quite private as well as public places. It's the continual dichotomy, I suppose, of public versus private. And they're happy. They've had a lot of sad things happen. They've had a lot of happy things happen.
Tell me some of the sad things that happened.
Oh, you're a really...
I'm a gossip.
Well, a man in Ottawa last week asked me which I would like to be laid out in, which I thought was a rather interesting way of looking at the houses. Which one did you like the best? Which one would you like to be buried
You mean
from?
to be laid out in your coffin?
That's right.
What a ghoulish question.
Well, it's the same kind of question you're asking me. You're asking me about
I didn't ask you if
sad
you wanted to be
experiences.
laid out in your coffin in any one of these houses. No.
No.
But it gives, sometimes a house has got a particular atmosphere about it because of tragedy or happiness.
Well, certainly when the house was expropriated by the government in 1943 without any reason given, it was a very sad time for the man who lived there. He fought it in the courts for 6 years and died 6 months after the decision.
Oh, it only
So that
became
was
the
very
official
sad.
Prime Minister's official
1950.
residence in 1950.
Yes.
I didn't
Yes.
know that.
And he, needless to say, was very upset. They said it was for commercial purposes they needed to have the house. So Mr. Saint Laurent was the first Prime Minister to live in the house in 1950.
Old Uncle Louis.
And as you can see from the pictures, the house was completely gutted and redone for the Prime Minister. And people around him, including his family, insist that he only accepted it because it was presented to him as a fait accompli, which adds again to the mystery of why it was expropriated in the first place if the Prime Minister of the day didn't even want it.
How big a family can live there? How large are the servants' quarters?
It depends how many
Kids
you want to
you've
put in
got.
a room.
I know, but servants' quarters. Vast servants' quarters?
Yes, it's a substantial house, a very large house by anyone's standards, I think.
From an intimate point of view, though, would you not rather live in the official opposition residence, Stornoway?
Well, I quite like Stornoway for personal reasons. It's a place I've lived most of my married life. My daughter was born there. A lot of things have...
You're an old married woman now, aren't you?
Oh, I am.
How many years?
10 next year.
10 next year.
Yeah, 11 for Joe, because he was in Japan for one of our anniversaries. And since he celebrated it twice,
So he's a day ahead of you.
No, he insists he's a whole year ahead of me.
So that's 10 years married, and you're not shy about your age, are you?
No, I'm proud to be 30.
And Joe must be
I've
what?
earned every gray hair on my head.
Joe must be what, 45 now?
43.
43.
Yes.
Now, Stornoway, a little background on Stornoway. I know nothing about it
Stornoway?
except it's the name of an island off the west coast of Scotland
That's
where
right.
it always rains and blows hurricanes.
Yes, well, that's, I didn't realize about the climate, but that's exactly
Appalling
where it is
climate.
from. Apparently, it's the name of a town on the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides.
Right.
The Pearlie Robertson family, who were the second owners of the house was built in 1914 for a dry goods merchant, whose son actually, one of his 3 sons, was the Member of Parliament for Argenteuil de Montagne, which is now Francis Fox's riding. And one of his sons was killed on the St. Croix when it was sunk in the war.
Oh, destroyer.
Yes, and the other son now lives in Montreal. But it was the Pearlie Robertsons, the Pearlies rather, were from the Isle of Stornoway.
They were from
So they called it Stornoway after their ancestral home.
Lewis, the Isle of Lewis,
Isle of
isn't
Lewis,
it?
yes. Apparently Stornoway is a place on the Isle of Lewis.
Yeah, Stornoway's the fishing
town,
village
or-
capital,
yes.
where a man called Leverhulme once tried to force the locals into activity by a fish plant soap factory. And they just put him in Coventry, refused to speak to him, and the wreck, or rather the old buildings still stand there because the men of Lewis would not work for an Englishman who came from south of the border.
I see.
More with Maureen McTeer and her book, Residencies. You could have got a better title.
I had a better title.
What was it?
Some have called them home.
And Prentice Hall decided to call it Residencies.
Their prerogative.
Their prerogative. For $24.95, they could have got a brighter title. Maureen McTeer after the break. Before we talk about Harrington, which is what, the official summer residence?
Country residence, yes.
Country residence. Another huge place.
Beautiful place.
I want to know, Maureen McTeer, why none of these public residencies are in fact open to the public,
That's
as
one
I
of the
recall it, any time whatsoever.
Well, that's not quite true. Mrs. Pearson had a Canadiana room that she collected pieces from all across Canada for 1967. The house was then open to the public for certain types of guided tours, mainly the Canadiana room itself. They're not really houses that are built for public, and they are the only places in the world where the people can be there, private, alone, and live their own
But
lives.
just not big enough, perhaps.
No, and
Were you never
now
tempted?
there's a security problem as well, which
Oh,
I think
of course
is,
so.
which
But were
is,
you never tempted in these quieter days to open the Canadiana room to the public yourself?
well, the Canadiana room was dismantled when the Trudeaus redecorated, so it's not there.
But you were
anymore.
saying that you brought back some Canadiana.
Well, what we did was we tried to use the first floor to have the history of Canada depicted.
How is it depicted? In pictures only, or are there any
No.
old artifacts?
A lot of artifacts.
Such
we had
as?
dinosaur bones from the Badlands of Alberta, for instance, which we had mounted, and we had Eskimo art, Indian art, Inuit works. We had all kinds of things. The formal den on the first floor was given over to the first Canadians, if you will, the first settlers, and
No current what's that word? Memorabilia.
Yes.
No current memorabilia. Like Johnny MacDonald's quill
we
pen.
had Sir Johnny MacDonald's clock actually
His
in
clock.
the dining room.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we had a lot. We had an amazing number of pieces that were loaned to us. We had the original B&A Act in Sir Johnny's hand on an écritoire in the formal living room.
On a which?
An écritoire, you know, it's a desk at which people used to
Oh,
write.
yes.
It's,
Écritoire.
yes.
Your French is better than my French. I can only
You don't
understand.
use it as much.
No, I can understand it when spoken by Joe.
I see.
And I take it
So
dreadfully.
he'll take that as a compliment.
No, it's not a compliment, really, because if I can understand somebody's
Well,
French,
then you'll have to phrase it so it is a compliment.
I can understand Joe's French, which means that I can't understand René Lévesque, but I can understand
I have a
Joe's
different
French.
style.
Écritoire.
Yes.
How's that?
Very well. Very, very good.
Écritoire. Not too bad, is it?
No.
For an old slob of a Scotch Canadian. Tell me about Harrington Lake. How much does that cost us poor taxpayers a year to give you and the likes of you
Actually-
a summer residence with your fleet of limousines and your dozens of
yes.
horses and carriages standing by there to cater to your every need?
Yes, it's really a great life. Harrington Lake was originally expropriated. Well,
Another one.
it was expropriated by was sold to the government actually by the Edwards family who owned it, and William Harridge, who was R.B. Bennett's brother-in-law. They owned it 2/3, 1/3. For a long time, it was just used by the FDC, as it was then, the National Capital Commission, as it is now, just to let out to people on first-come, first-served basis. The Special Committee of the House and the Senate had decided that they would build there a complex similar to the Chateau Lake Louise complex and in Alberta. But the chairman of the FDC at the time wanted it to be a less public place, so decided that what he needed was a public place without the people. So he thought, well, perhaps we could make it a country place for the Prime Minister of the day, and it fell well because the Prime Minister just elected was John Diefenbaker, who didn't have a country home and who enjoyed fishing, and the caretaker with whom I spoke was directed by the chairman to take Mr. Diefenbaker fishing and to be sure that he caught a trout. And he did, and the next year the place, under the Official Residence Acts, was made the country home of the Prime Minister of Canada.
So it was John who bought it, really, for the use of Prime Ministers?
Well, it was no, it was already owned by the government. It's just its use, it became used exclusively as a prime ministerial place in
Nice place?
1950. It's beautiful.
Did you redo it as well?
No, it's a very rustic place, and I suppose had we stayed longer, we probably would have had some of the furniture recovered or things like that.
When you go back again...
Yes.
To these,
you want to come as a guest?
No, I don't want to come.
Because you've never been there.
No. I don't like...
You don't like coming as a guest? You'd love it. It's beautiful.
Harrington Lake, there's no golf course.
No, there isn't.
And I don't fish.
There's one nearby. If you came in the winter, you could go skiing.
No, I'd break my legs if I went skiing.
Cross country, you could cross country.
No. But I was saying, when you return...
You could toboggan.
Could sit by the fireside and have a dram.
That's right.
When you go back, eventually, as I'm sure, you're confident, of course, that you're going back.
Well, we're certainly working towards that.
From Stornoway to Sussex Drive in Harrington Lake. Do you plan more changes?
I think we would probably follow some of the same themes. But we're very different people now. We are, in a way, we've matured. We've been through a lot of things, and I have very definite ideas. I think my appreciation of Canadian art has increased, and I think Cecilia and Maureen, my two architect friends, are always full of ideas and suggestions. I think we would
So
probably
even now, as
well.
you sit partially in the political wilderness, you're scheming and dreaming of changes that you'll make to
It's funny,
Harrington and Stornoway.
No, I didn't then, and I don't think I think one of the things that you learn quite early on in politics is that you never even consider that the chicken is going to have an egg, let alone that it might hatch someday.
It might drop on the floor and be all over the place.
That's right.
Well, Maureen, I sometimes have the feeling that you're not shy, obviously, but you don't push yourself into the spotlight very much, do you? Are you basically, like me, a shy person?
We're both very shy, retiring people.
Covering up our sensitivity by this apparent brashness on occasion.
Well, I think I've got mine more under control than you do, but...
An unkind cat. Maureen McTeer, nice to meet you. When's the election going to be?
Oh, you're asking the wrong person. There's a couple going on today, actually.
I know. Well, they should be very intriguing elections,
Yes,
and may well
they
help
should
to
be.
decide the political future
Oh, I
of the
don't
country.
think so. Well, probably. New Brunswick, you mean?
New Brunswick could be quite a thing. Broadbent, what's Ray's riding again?
Broadview, Greenwood.
Broadview, Greenwood, and what's the other one?
And Leeds, Grenville, and Temiskaming.
Well, if there were a Tory swoop, you would certainly make you very pleased, would it not?
Oh, yes, it would be great.
My thanks to Maureen McTeer and her book, which should have been called Some Have Lived There. But
Some have called them home.
Some have called them home.
But is called...
Residencies.
Right. Homes of
and
Canada's
costs
leaders.
are modest.
$24.95 and no sales tax on books.
Why no
apparently.
sales tax? So on
Apparently
books?
I was surprised too.
When are you going back to practice law?
Hopefully in the new year
Oh, where?
in Ottawa.
In court?
Well, I'd like to do administrative law.
Administrative law?
Yes, probably a federal court.
A backroom person? Can you take a job like that as a
I
wife?
promised Joe that I would never plead before judges that he's appointed. Other than that, I don't see too many problems. I would certainly not do anything that involved a conflict of interest for him.
So, but administrative law in a back room would be ideal for you.
Well, provided I had a front office.
How's Catherine?
She's started to school.
She must be how old now?
5.
5.
Yeah.
Just the one.
Brownies, piano, the whole song.
Planning to have a larger family?
I have one perfect child.
Good. My thanks to Maureen McTeer. Give my regards to Mr. Clark.
I certainly will.
I'm looking forward to seeing him here again so we
To
can
practice your French.
Écritoire. My thanks to Maureen McTeer. Next, The Agony of Ireland with Sidney Callahan after the break. Thank you very much, Emma.
Is that the way you feel?
It is, goddamn. The only reason she was on is because she's the Prime Minister's, former Prime Minister's wife. Quite nice.
Yeah.
It's the massacres in Lebanon that are center stage in the world these days, but it's not so long since every eye was watching the appalling outrages in London when the troop of cavalry was blown up by the IRA. Not that I'm trying to whip up a storm this morning, but I have here Sidney Callahan, who's a Methodist minister from Belfast. I think he's a former head man in the Methodist Church of Ireland. Is that not so, Mr. Callahan?
Well, something like that.
President of the Methodist Church in Ireland from 1980 to 1981. Are the Methodists a force in Ireland as such, or is it not basically the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church with the Presbyterian churches?
Well, we're not very large numerically. We're about 50,000 right throughout Ireland. We are therefore a minority, but of course with minorities you don't count them, you weigh them. It's the quality that matters, not the quantity.
And what's the quality and the weight of the Methodist influence in these dreadful things in Northern Ireland?
Well, there are some commentators who would say that when the history of these times comes to be written, that the two religious groupings that will come out of them without any loss of credibility are the Methodists and the Quakers. I wouldn't presume to say that's accurate. I hope it is, and some of us try to see that it is.
The Quakers are active in the traditional peaceful role in Northern Ireland. I didn't know that.
Oh yes, they are active.
What do the Quakers do?
Well, they make a very significant contribution in that they seek to be a serving group, they seek to be a facilitating group and bring together folk of different traditions.
Now, you've been called, described as running a ministry of reconciliation. I'd love to hear some good news out of Ireland, because from where I sit, which is the old-fashioned traditional view, there is no solution in our lifetimes or our children's lifetimes for Northern Ireland. Disabuse me.
Well, there are two things. First of all, you are looking at the future and you are making some sort of comment and saying that you do not see any bright future. And in a sense, politically, I would have to agree with you in that I do not detect the will to find a solution in either Northern Ireland or in the Republic of Ireland or in the UK for that matter. But that being said, there are those of us who go on seeking to work creatively, and there are the creative things which are happening, which very often do not receive the limelight, which very often are not spoken about because they don't make good news.
But are people willing to make creative moves at a time when you've still got armed soldiers, roadblocks, outrages, attacks and counterattacks along the border and in the main cities of the United Kingdom? How can you take part in reconciliation in a climate like that?
Well, I think it's all the more important that you do take part in reconciliation in that sort of climate. After all, there is a little saying that it's better to light one small candle than to curse the darkness. Mm-hmm. The darkness can be pretty hellish and pretty grim, but some of us operate with the candles.
Is there any ecumenical move at all between, how would you say it, between Catholics and Anglicans and Methodists and Presbyterians to work together on both sides of the street?
Yes, undoubtedly there is. I mean, for example, in my year of office, the heads of the churches meet together. That is, the cardinal, the primate, the moderator, and the president of the Methodist Church meet together regularly every 6 to 8 weeks. And right throughout that year, we visited centres like Dublin, Belfast, Londonderry, and Cork. And in that way, while we had our disagreements and our divergences, we at least were able to show people that we could agree to disagree in charity.
Well, way back in 1968, when you first took up your ministry in Belfast, is that right?
Well, a bit before that.
A bit before that. But 68 was the time of the civil liberties marches, which would seem to be going ahead with great progress before the trouble started out with these two people, Paisley and the woman.
Bernadette Devlin.
Bernadette Devlin. Was there not a chance in 68, because the British surely recognised the discrimination that did exist, was there not a chance then, if these mouthy people had been silenced, of peace from 68 on?
Well, obviously, there is a sense in which some of us were not as active as we should have been, and I think that very often those who were the articulators of hate and the purveyors of bitterness, that they had the scene and they, in fact, took the forefront. But that has meant that we have a lot of ground to make up, and there are those who are trying to work at
How
that.
do you get through to the youngsters who've been taught on both sides of the barricades to throw gasoline bombs at soldiers and whatnot and whatnot? Occasionally the soldiers lose their cool. I think that's quite obvious. How do you get through to these youngsters whose minds are twisted and perverted?
Well, first of all, you've got to look at the whole sociological problem, whence they come, and very often they are youngsters who come from areas of deprivation on both sides of the divide. You try to understand their problems, you try to bring them together, and they are brought together in places like Corrymeela, which is a centre of reconciliation, in which they begin to see and understand that there is no essential difference, that Protestant tears are no different to Catholic tears, and a broken heart's a broken heart no matter where you experience it.
To be specific, though, if you've got the Boy Scouts or the Boys Brigade,
Yes.
I presume they still have these
They still have
youth organisations.
They do.
Do they carry both the religions, or are they, what's the word, separate units,
Separate.
no Catholic? I mean, my feeling always has been if you can't get kids to school together, they'll never understand each other.
Well, I think that is partly true. On the other hand, I think one of the dangers of liberals is that we assume that integrated education is the answer to everything. If that was true, one would have all peace and tranquility in the university context, in that their people are together, and yet they can on occasions be areas of tension and strife. And while I would not knock the concept of integrated education, in fact work with it, I don't know that is solely the answer, because after all, we really reflect the culture patterns that we learn in the home, and they can't always be eroded by what we learn in school.
No, but the school helps. If you're brought up in separate camps with bigotry in the background, you never become friends.
Well, I think that's fair comment, and I think one of the things that some of us are working at is bringing people together in which we help them recognise their common humanity.
Yeah, you know, as a youngster in another part of the UK, you know, Roman Catholics to us were strange people to whom you didn't speak. It was a ghastly atmosphere of bigotry.
I would agree with that. However, in a sense, for me, my background was a different background in that I grew up in the Republic of Ireland, where I was part of the 5% minority, and the bulk of my friends were those who belonged to another religious tradition, and I related them. And
but Southern Ireland has always been calmer in many ways and more tolerant than Northern Ireland or the west of Scotland.
I think that is true, but part of the reason for that may well be that if you look at the numbers game, in that in the Republic we are just 5% of the population, and my Roman Catholic friends are 95%, and if that 5% is a very significant minority making a very positive contribution, who do not really rock the boat, they therefore can live in peace and tranquility.
I can wish you nothing but the best, but perhaps the best and firmest move that could be made would be if the Brits finally couldn't afford it any longer and said, we're leaving, look after yourselves. What would happen?
I think there'd be a Holocaust. Let me say that, first of all, I am by conviction a pacifist. I'm equally an Irishman, and therefore I make this observation with very serious import, that if the British Army pulled out, I think we'd have a bloodbath.
Well, I've got to give you credit for faith and hope in the future, because I think that's the standard view, that the British are fulfilling at least a sense of conscience nowadays by staying there.
That's right.
Do they want to stay there?
Not at all, and I think those who are honest in the political arena in the other parts of the UK would love to wash their hands of Ireland, and one doesn't altogether blame them. If I was an objective observer, I would totally understand. If I was a taxpayer living in the mainland, I think I would want to wash my hands of Ireland, and if possible, shove it out in the Atlantic, pull the stopper out and let it go to the bottom. But that can't be done.
More with Sidney Callahan, who's a realist, at least, although he's a Christian too. An idealist as well as a realist, after the break. It's not the worst problem on the international scene, but it's one of the worst, and I'm talking about the situation in Northern Ireland. What about the political solution? Are you prepared to talk to me about the possible political solution? Every time I turn around, somebody refuses to form a coalition, somebody refuses to do this and that. The Republic government to the south refuses to cooperate in across-the-border searches. And while men of goodwill like yourself you know, bite away at the edges of the problem. It's an impossible task, said he hopelessly.
Yes, I think there's a sense in which it seems to be an impossible task, but we must go on trying to be the catalyst in the situation and trying to bring people together. In the political arena, it very often seems to me that in a society, you get the politicians you deserve. God help Canada, God help Ireland, but we get the politicians we deserve. And sometimes they are people who see politics as a game that they want to play at, and they are not really looking for solutions.
Mind you, you've got to be a brave man to run in politics in Northern Ireland. You're just as liable to get blasted away in your doorstep as to get a contribution to your campaign funds, aren't you?
Yes, well, you're just as liable to get blasted away if you try to be a reconciler, but that's the name of the game. You must go on trying to act creatively, and some of the people who are bumped off in the political arena, in a sense, have simply been on the receiving end of other people's viciousness and hatred. I think there are those of us who would want rather to live for Ireland rather than to die for Ireland, and we go on trying to live for it.
Now, forget the name of these women who got the Nobel Peace Prize. Williams, was it?
Yes.
Did that movement, what was it called? Did you recall?
Well, the peace movement, or the movement for peace, yes.
And there were the two women that picked up
right.
the award for Nobel.
Right.
Did that movement just die?
I think tragically that tended to die. It ran out of steam. It was in respect to women who, in a sense, made a contribution, and one doesn't want to knock it, but it ran out of steam because it hadn't depth. I think that they were idealists, but one has to couple the idealism with the realism.
Yeah, one of the leaders of the dreadful impetus of one of a family being slaughtered in something or other, as I recall.
That's right, Mairead Corrigan, who was subsequently married.
Yeah. I don't know what the answer is. You're nipping away at the problem in little bits and pieces on the side with your Ministry of Reconciliation, but do you ever actually get them together to resolve political fashion that something's going to be done about it?
Well, there are those of us who work on with this because we recognise that ultimately there must be political solutions, in that there cannot be a military solution. There must be political solutions, and therefore what we try to do is to bring together politicians, to get them to talk together with integrity and with candour, because quite clearly in any mature society there has to be some sort of give and take, and we have to try to encourage people to do that.
On the face of it, without the violence in Northern Ireland is legislatively much more progressive than Southern Ireland, isn't it?
Well, there are those who would debate that, but I think in honesty one must say so.
And the welfare state still works, I presume, in Northern Ireland.
Oh yes, it works, and it is manifest in the National Health Service, which is a very fine health service, in the education system, which is a very fine education system, and in fact, interestingly enough, some of the leaders which have emerged in the political arena, coming from the minority, were those who benefited by the education system, which enabled them to have full education, which is right and proper, but they have become now the leaders and have been the people who've articulated ideas.
I know it's the wrong thing to say, but the tolerance of the British taxpayer is almost incomprehensible, is it not? Rebuilding schools, rebuilding houses, rebuilding plants, because you can't get insurance on an industrial plant in Northern Ireland, can you?
I would agree that that is so, but I have the healthy realism about the political arena. Sometimes they do that because, after all, 1 million people, there are 1.5 million in Northern Ireland, there are 1 million people who would claim an allegiance to the British tradition and would claim that they're British.
And almost hysterical allegiance.
Almost hysterical allegiance, yes. But therefore, they would maintain that in getting these benefits and in getting these underwriting of finances, that in fact they are merely getting their just dues. And they would also maintain that in the past that they have made a contribution to British life, not only in the political arena, the military arena, but in the academic arena, and therefore that what is being given to them is just and proper, and they're getting nothing they do not merit or deserve.
What's the unemployment rate in Northern Ireland?
Unemployment rate, tragically, is much higher than yours in Canada, where I believe is 12%. We're up to 22%, and in some areas it's even higher than that. It's therefore a very serious problem which exacerbates the situation, because obviously if people are unemployed, they're much more vulnerable and they're much more open to be misled and to get involved in terrorist activity.
Migration might be the answer for some of the folk if they can get out. Or is that the wrong thing to say?
No, that's an honest answer. That's an honest response. There are some people who have left the country, and the thing that disturbs some of us is that there are people who we feel would make a very significant contribution to finding solutions, are those who feel they've got to get offside because they cannot cope with it any longer.
Is it possible to lead a normal life in most parts of Northern Ireland today without being harried, kneecapped, shot at, blown up or whatnot?
Oh, without doubt. I mean, I think one of the dangers of a media-conscious world is that we tend to get a distorted view in that, after all, the media concentrates on the abnormal, not the normal, the bizarre, the way out, in that good news doesn't really make news.
The guns,
exactly.
the overturned buses,
Exactly.
the flames,
That's
and all
right.
the rest of
But
it.
there is a great deal that is creative and wholesome, and I often say to my American friends, for example, you are safer in Belfast than you will be in Chicago, New York, Detroit.
That's a wee bit hard to take.
No, that is accurate.
Oh, come off it.
That is statistically accurate.
I'm safer walking down York Street in
You are
Belfast.
safer.
Belfast.
Yes, that is absolutely true. And
But I'm not safer if I go into a pub and start a religious argument.
Well, it depends what pub you go into.
Or if I come in and demand a contribution for the UDF or the IRA.
Well, that might be true in Glasgow.
Or if somebody asks of me a contribution, I'm going to give in case I get kneecapped.
You possibly would, but on the other hand, there are all sorts of wholesome creative things. Our work input is high, our productivity is high.
Oh, I'm sympathetic. Don't misunderstand me.
I know I respond to what you say, and I agree with the criticism, but I also think we must emphasize the positive and creative
It's
things.
possible to lead a normal suburban life in Belfast and never know that the other side of the town is burning down.
Yes, I mean, that's a sad thing in a sense. There's a little quip which says that Malone fiddles while the Falls burns, and to some degree that is sadly true. The Malone is the more affluent area of the city.
Yeah,
Yes.
Malone fiddles
While,
the Falls burns.
Yeah, and to some degree there is some truth in that. It's not totally fair to the middle classes, but they're not always as concerned as they ought to be, and not always as involved as they ought to be in a creative way. But there are exciting things happening in the world of the arts, in the world of literature. There are those who are becoming the poets, etc., and the dramatists, and making a contribution.
Because the Irish, anyway, and this is a non-partisan statement, are quite crazy.
We are absolutely
Protestant
crazy.
and Catholic. I
That's
mean,
right.
You're all mad.
We're absolutely all mad, but that's what makes us sort of lovable and enables us to make this Celtic contribution to the wider world, in that we've enriched literature with the Shaws and the O'Caseys and the Beans and the Wilds, to mention but a few, and we have made a contribution of all proportion to our numbers. I'm not doing a bad job for tourism, am I?
I know, but I wouldn't go to Northern Ireland as a tourist. Come on now,
Oh,
Sydney.
yes, it's a beautiful county. It's a beautiful province, and I say that as a southerner. It's a beautiful province.
Where were you actually born?
I was born in Dublin, but don't hold that against me.
Yeah, your accent is northern now.
Oh, I hope not. I mean, they do say that Dubliners speak the most perfect English,
$1,000
apart from Inverness.
$1,000 to a nickel that you went to Trinity College.
I did, that's right. And to Queen's.
One of the best universities in Europe, I suppose.
I would hope so. One must be humbly proud about
You
it.
want to try and take your modest charm on some phone calls about the Irish question?
Well, I haven't any modest charm, but I'll take the phone calls because otherwise they might say I was afraid of them.
Oh, not you. Almost said father. It's not father, it's mister.
I don't mind what you call me as long as it's not too early in the morning.
That's an old joke.
I know, but it's worth trying.
Your calls to Sidney Callahan, a Methodist, if you please, after the break. That's 800 miles up the coast. Go ahead from Prince Rupert to Sidney Callahan.
Yes, Mr. Callahan. I would like to ask you, just how are the Jesuit priests contributing to the situation in Northern Ireland today?
I think that there are men of goodwill in every religious tradition who are making a positive contribution. There is, in fact, a Jesuit priest, Father Michael Hurley, who has recently suggested the establishing of a community which would be Catholic and Protestant, called Columbanus, and he wants to establish this in Northern Ireland. It has backing from the mainstream churches, both of Protestant and Catholic tradition, and he is making a contribution, and there are others who have made the same sort of contribution, and I pay tribute where tribute is due.
Sir, I'd like to make a point first. I have read many articles condemning the Jesuit priests as they are not men of God, but they are in fact piercing into society and trying to disrupt the whole economical system
I don't
of
think
democratic society today.
somebody else with a Machiavelli complex.
I think that is a rather naive
No,
concept.
excuse me, sir. My
Yes.
source comes from a man who once was a Jesuit priest and has since fallen away from the Catholic
Yes.
faith.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay, dispose of
Yes,
this call, please.
I don't know that such a person is always the best interpreter of his tradition. Anybody who leaves a tradition sometimes does so with chip on his shoulder.
Here, you can't trust a backslider that much, can you?
Well, I would tend to think so.
Go ahead, please.
Hello.
That's you.
Yeah, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Callahan for what he's doing there. I think it's a fine work. I mean, what I'm getting from it, at least he's trying to bring peace, trying to bring the two sides together.
And he doesn't carry a gun.
Seems to be the problem there, that in the past what inflamed that, perhaps in the name of religion, but a religion without peace, without love in it, isn't Christianity, as far as I'm concerned. This seems to be the thing that has brought a lot of the problems there, is the two sides, Protestant and Catholic. Instead of trying to bring the people together, they've tried to bring them apart and caused a lot of disarray that's there.
What do you say to that?
Yes, I think in some ways that's a fair comment. It's a bit superficial. There was a commentator who said about the Irish scene that the Roman Catholics in the south of Ireland, among some of the finest Roman Catholics in the world, the Protestants in the north of Ireland, among some of the finest Protestants in the world, but between the two of them they make up some of the worst Christians in the world. And while I, as an Irishman, would mildly resent such a statement, there is a degree of accuracy in it. Nonetheless, having said that, there are men and women of goodwill in both traditions who are not concerned about the labels, which after all are fundamentally very often accidents of birth, but who are seeking to be men and women who are followers of Christ. And if you are a follower of Christ, you see a person as a person, you respect his dignity and worth, and you try and deal with him with dignity and with respect because he is a person, and you do not worry too much about the labels. Because after all, Jesus did say, love your neighbour, and he didn't qualify that by who your neighbour was.
Go ahead, please.
Yes?
That's you.
Yeah, I want to ask the Minister if he doesn't think that Ireland should be united.
That is a political affirmation. Let me say that there are those of my fellow countrymen who would say it should be united, and I think that scenario is one that must be looked at, but one would have to say that if that is done, there would have to be some sort of accommodation. There are 1.5 million people in the north of Ireland, and it may be, it's quite clear that over 1 million of them don't want to be part of the Republic of Ireland, and it may be that if some sort of forced union took place, that there would be disruption, and that some people have learned the techniques of urban guerrilla warfare in one of the most refined theatres in the world, and they would break up the thing. But if there was to be a union, there would clearly have to be a different sort of Ireland, in which there would be a new Ireland, in which there would have to be an accommodation of different traditions, and it would have to be a pluralist society, which is something which is very difficult for such a religious island to accept as that, in that religious people, churchmen in particular, are not all that good at accepting the concept of pluralism, in which there must be an acceptance of other values and other standards other than one's own, and in which you live and let live. And we haven't a good track record in that in our Irish scene. But then maybe there are one or two other places which haven't got it either.
You can say that again, but mostly they manage it without mayhem. But a loose confederation of all Ireland must come someday if there's going to be any kind of peaceful solution in the long run, starting with a loose confederation and the pluralism you talk about.
I would think we've got to work at that.
Mm-hmm. No be in your day, will it?
Well, I intend working at it along with others, but not in the political arena, but from outside.
I hope it will be. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack.
Uh-huh.
And Reverend Callahan. I served in Londonderry from 1940 until the end of the war.
Yeah.
During the war years, were these factions fighting against one another in Ireland at that time, or during the war did this more or less cease?
There are some who would say that they've always been fighting in Ireland, they always will. That is a rather facile judgment, but obviously when in that arena, when there was some sort of common enemy and some sort of common difficulty, that tended to bring people together in a united way, and they were fighting a common enemy. When that has departed, they tend to become inward-looking and to have some degree of strife. But
matter of fact, there was no strife really from 1939, the small dynamitings in Britain, until 1968. Nothing to speak of. There was comparative peace all the way at that time. The odd policeman was killed in Derry now and again, or the odd IRA man, but that was the old-fashioned IRA.
That's right.
For which one had a certain measure of respect, and that they only fought against the authorities.
That's right, and they had a degree of idealism, as distinct from the provos, which seemed to be devoid of it.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning.
Thank God for men of Mr. Callahan's stature, and thank you for bringing him on your program. I saw a TV program a few months back indicating that there was a program where Irish children were being brought to Canada over the summer holidays, and the program was showing these children prior to their departure for Ireland. Some were obviously homesick, some were asked questions and they indicated
that's right. We had
to go back.
Yes.
they indicated that, you know, how much they appreciated sort of a normal life apart from the strife. And I wondered whether Reverend Callahan knew of this program, and is there anything more that we can do in Canada here that might foster that sort of thing and improve the situation and what he's trying to do?
I pay tribute to those who do this sort of thing. There are those who would honestly, seriously question as to its long-term effectiveness, in that folk go back into the community from which they come, and if they don't meet again, that's not a good thing. There are those who are trying to do this on the spot in Ireland, such as the Corrymeela community, and that's not a commercial plug, because I pay tribute to it as one who's not involved in it. But people like the Corrymeela community and other groups of people are trying to do that in the context of the culture in which people live, and some folk feel that would be more effective.
But any little relief you can give to these youngsters is surely worthwhile.
Yes, any little relief.
Because we had a number of them on the air here. I forget the name of the woman. Sarah Hughes.
Sarah Hughes, that's right.
Sarah Hughes.
Oh yes, and one gives tribute, one pays tribute where tribute is due, and one is not in any way undermining that, one is supportive of. But I would simply say that the best contribution you can make is to try to understand us and our agony, to come and visit us, to bring some industries to us, and to come and see for yourself.
First call I've ever had from Wells, BC. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
And I'd say I've ever had in all these
Well, I
years.
should hope so. We just began to get television up here.
Where are you living in Wells? Is the old hotel still there?
Which one?
The old Wells Hotel. It burned down, I presume.
No, it's just empty.
Just standing there empty. Okay, that's a touch of maudlin.
Wells Fargo, obviously.
Wells, Barkerville, big gold rush, you know, all that jazz. Go ahead to Reverend Callahan.
Well, I went home to Ireland 2 years ago, in Skillen,
Yeah.
County Fermanagh,
Know it well.
where I was born,
Yes.
and it was a real eye-opener.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that you talk about this kind of thing, but I don't think anyone has any idea of the security getting at Heathrow when you're going to Ireland, search and the whole thing.
If you ever went from London to Israel, you might find the same thing.
And well,
London
I
to Beirut.
understand. And then getting off at Belfast, and
So what's your overall impression? We don't want
what was my impression?
What do you want to say to Mr.
Sad.
Callahan? Sad.
Sad.
The security in Ireland makes it a sad country, is what he's trying to say from far off Wells, BC.
Right, well, there is a sense in which that's true, but there are the issues elsewhere in the world which make many of the rest of us sad, too.
Go ahead from Duncan.
Welcome, Reverend Callahan. I just got back 2 weeks ago from Northern Ireland,
Welcome home.
and I had a lovely time. Believe me, you can walk down Belfast or anywhere, and I've travelled all over Northern Ireland and had a marvellous time.
Just don't leave your suitcase in the street or somebody will blow it up for you.
Don't leave your
Not a
suitcase
bit
here
of
in the
it.
street or they'll pinch it on you.
It was lovely, every bit of it, believe me. And it was lovely to be home. And I just wanted to tell the people that really they don't have anything to worry about, to go on holidays and enjoy it.
Thank you, ma'am.
That's right.
But thank you, Sidney Callahan, for coming in here this morning, and I wish you nothing but the very best in your quiet, peaceful endeavours, and I hope one day, in your time, they find the solution to the agony of Ireland. Hey?
We'll work at it.
Next, we're going to go to the agony of Marjorie Shaw, who's here with her lawyer, Rick Rhodes, this morning to tell us on the lack of progress about her stolen and missing children. After the break. Marjorie Shaw, who is now reverted to her own name of Marjorie Swanson, was on this programme precisely 2 years ago on this very day. And at that time she told us the extraordinarily sad story, which can be repeated tenfold throughout the province and 100-fold throughout the country, about the apparent ineffectiveness of a court order to keep your children. Marjorie, and she's Marjorie Shaw Swanson, is here this morning with her lawyer Rick Rhodes, who's come along to tell us some of the trials and tribulations. Marjorie, how old are your children now?
They're 6 and 7.
These are the two wee souls we saw. When did you last see them?
79.
August the 18th, 1979.
Yes.
Just to whet our interest, what had you been doing that day, and how come your children disappeared?
I got up in the morning, and his mother was staying over night, and she said she was going to take me to the P&E that day. And we got up in the morning, and I got dressed, and we left. And when I got back, the key was in the door, and I didn't know what was going on. So I opened up the door, and as I walked in, my brother, he was staying with us, he came downstairs and he said, the kids are gone and the furniture is gone, and I didn't believe him. And then when I walked into the living room, it was true. He had taken my children. The furniture that we had, he had taken, and I hadn't seen him since.
This is your husband?
Yes.
And you'd gone to the P&E,
Yes.
spent a fairly... had your marriage broken before that time?
No, it hadn't.
How long had you been married?
4 years.
How old were you then? How old were you when you were married?
Oh, I got married when I was 16.
16, so you were 20 years of age. You had 2 little children whose names are Annette and Joseph.
That's right.
One born in 77, one born in 76. And your marriage must have been a wee bit rocky at the time.
No, not really. I didn't know anything was happening.
And you come back from the P&E and your children have gone.
Yep.
Have you seen them since?
No, I haven't.
Have you any idea where they are?
No, I don't.
Mr. Rhodes is Marjorie's lawyer. Can you fill in some of the steps after the children vanished from the house? Was it in Vancouver, by the way, the house?
No, it was in Surrey.
In Surrey. What would happen legally there after that, Mr. Rhodes?
That was in August, and in September, Marjorie came to see me, and we went into court as quickly as we could. September 20th, we obtained an order in the provincial court, the family court, for custody of the children, as well as other matters. On the 26th, we obtained an order to apprehend the children, and we had to do it on the 2 separate days because once you get the custody order, you have to attempt to try and obtain custody physically, and only when you're obviously denied that, then you can go back and prove what you need to get the warrant to apprehend. We got the warrant to apprehend on September 26th.
That's the warrant to apprehend the 2 children?
The children, yes. That was an interim hearing. The final hearing was set for December 10. This is all in 1979. In the meantime, I know Marjorie went and looked feverishly for the children with this warrant basically in hand, and to all authorities who would listen to her. Went as far as California, and with some cooperation there, nonetheless, she came up empty-handed. To this day, I think she's still empty-handed despite spending money.
Has the husband, on the face of it, committed any offense as such?
No, when he took the children in August of 1979, there was no court order, just 2 people living together with their natural children, and he was entitled to have them with him as he wanted. Now, of course, if Marjorie had the children physically and he were to take them, he'd be in violation of that court order.
So first of all, before she's got what you might call formal and official legal status, she's got to have the kids in her possession.
That's a matter of fact, getting them into her possession. She's got some formal and official legal status now, but the court, all they can do is make orders. They can't actually reach out and give her the children, which is what she needs.
But if these children were locatable in British Columbia, what would be the effect then? She's now been divorced, I understand.
Yes, that's correct.
And does she have permanent custody of the children on paper?
Yes, she does. And the children could be picked up by the sheriffs and taken directly to her, if we could locate.
But only anywhere in Canada or just in British Columbia?
Basically anywhere in Canada. The problem here has been that he's gone international as far as we can tell. Now, depending on what country or state of what country he's found in, it's all a matter of treaty law. And that country may cooperate and they may not.
So what resources are available to her now? She must find the children virtually by her own resources.
Exactly.
Will human resources help in BC?
I don't believe that they will. The only other thing, Jack, I could say is that that warrant should go into the system in Ottawa that's projected all over the country by computer. If a police officer were to stop Mr. Shaw with the children, say, in New Brunswick, presumably when he checked, he would find out about that, but there's been no luck so far.
So as long as the former husband stays away from a CPIC check in the hands of the Canadian police, his whereabouts in this country, supposing, for instance, he were drawing family allowance for the children in Canada, is it possible for you to go to the family allowance people, it didn't used to be, and say, please tell me where these children are, where the checks are being sent to?
I don't know, and you must remember that I'm a solicitor, and I after we obtained the appropriate court orders, turned Mrs. Shaw over to a private detective, and she tried to use his agencies to use these things.
Did you have any luck with the private detectives at all?
No.
Did you have any money to spend lavishly on private detectives?
Yes, my mother spent quite a bit of money
How
on
much, if you want to tell me?
them. 10,000, roughly.
$10,000?
Yeah.
Looking for your former husband's name was what? Joseph?
Shaw.
Joseph Shaw, is that
Yep.
correct? $10,000?
Yep.
Looking where?
Oh, everywhere. She went down to California, just about everywhere in BC. We had posters up, we had all kinds of things up for the whereabouts of my children.
Notices? Did you post a reward or something at one time?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. We had pictures of the children and my ex-husband and his mother, and there was a reward out for it. The RCMP's number was on it, and so was my mother's.
And that was a number of years ago, was it?
Yes, it was.
So it's, how many years from 77? No,
79.
79
Yeah.
to 82, that's 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And not a whisper of success from
No.
any of the investigations or the money.
No, nothing.
Sad, isn't it?
Yes, and now the children don't look the same as they did 3 years ago. They were quite young then, and that makes it all that much more difficult.
What was Joseph Shaw's occupation?
He was a baker, worked in Burnaby, and he quit just a few days after August 18th when we tried to contact him, and left without trace.
And a reason to believe he might be in California.
At one time we thought he was. I think that he's had support from other people, and now he may have changed his name, and he may have other identification cards. So even if he were stopped, it might not be possible to identify him on the spot.
Let's see a picture of, we'll do another short segment. We'll put up a picture of the children again at the beginning of the next segment. More with Marjorie Shaw. Now, Swanson was your maiden name.
Yes, it is.
You've gone back to Swanson.
Yes, I have.
And her lawyer, her solicitor, Rick Rhodes, after the break.
I was 79.
Show me the pictures of Annette and Joseph again, would you please, Pat, up on the screen? When were these pictures taken?
About 79.
1979. Well, they'll have grown and changed quite a bit since then, won't they?
Oh, yes.
And that's how they were dressed, more or less, at the time they disappeared.
That's right.
Annette, when you spent all this money on private detectives, did you have any responses at all?
Well, we had some gentleman that called, and he said he talked to my mom, and he said he knew where the children were and everything. So Mom had told him to phone back and talk to me because I wasn't in at the time. And when he phoned back, he told me that he would have to meet me. It was in Richmond. I can't remember what the hotel was
Doesn't
called.
matter. You met him in Richmond.
Okay, yeah. And so when I met him, he called me like on the phone, the hotel phone, and told me to rent a room and that he would find out the number from the operator. So Mom and I had rented a room, and he told me to go up there and wait. So I waited, and he showed me pictures of the children and everything else and told me that the kids were fine, and he really talked like he knew about the kids and
Were there real
everything
pictures
else.
of your kids?
Yes, there was. They were really pictures of
And
the
had
kids.
you seen these pictures before?
Yes, I had.
I mean, they had come from your house some way.
Yes. they
So he
had.
knew the family.
That's right.
Had you met him before?
I never seen him. He would
But he
never
had these
let me.
legitimate pictures?
Yes, they were.
Did he let you keep the pictures?
No, he didn't.
And then what happened?
So he said to get a flight down to San Francisco because that's where the children would be. So Mom and I had gone over and got a ticket to San Francisco. Now, when we got the tickets, he had contacted my mother and said that they would have to meet. So as I was flying down, Mom was meeting this gentleman, and Mom had paid, I think it was $1,000, had given him $1,000 for the reward. And when I got down there, there was nothing. I was supposed to wait for a phone call.
She paid him a reward in advance.
Mm-hmm.
So you went down to San Francisco at this hotel where he told you to go?
That's right, and I would get a phone call, and I never got one. So the next day, automatically, I flew back up. I had phoned Mom and talked to her and said there was nothing. So I had flown back up, and since then, I hadn't heard nothing.
But that's quite mysterious, that, isn't it? If these were pictures of her children produced by this man in Richmond after the children had disappeared, he must have had contact with your husband or in some way with your possessions.
Oh, yes, I agree with that.
I can't say anything about that. I didn't know at the time this man had pictures of the children. But I would say that it compounds the tragedy. When you think of a woman whose children... It's
Being built, in addition, not that the $1,000 in relation is perhaps the less important factor, but being built by some character who'd said he had the children, and you and your mother believed him, flew down to San Francisco, no children there.
That's right.
So unless she has a stroke of luck or Joseph Shaw is picked up on a computer check, would if you were picked up on that kind of, with that kind of warrant outstanding, the warrant would be for what against Joseph Shaw?
Well, it was for his non-appearance in family court on December 10th of 1979.
And that would, that's sufficient for the police to hold him to inquire about it, is it?
Yes, although I must say that when a warrant relates to a family matter, I don't think it gets the same serious treatment that a warrant relating to a criminal matter does.
No, the police often take the attitude, don't bother us with this, it's a family matter, get your own lawyer, do your own thing.
That's right.
In fact, am I not right, Mr. Rhodes, that the police would only be of specific physical help if you said, here is my warrant, he's living there, the 2 kids are in the house, please come with me, here's my custody order so that I can enforce this custody order.
I have seen that situation, although I wouldn't want to criticize all police officers.
No,
they do what they
but
can.
generally speaking, the family matter is kind of low on the totem pole unless it's some horrendously sensational case of some kind.
It is low on the totem pole, that's right.
So where do you go from here, Marjorie, my dear?
Just keep trying, that's all I can do.
Well, come back in another 2 years. Oh, look, who knows what might
In
happen?
another 2 years, I hope I have them.
Sure hope so, too. Yeah, you don't even know what name they're in, do you?
No, I don't.
Well, anybody who has any information about the shot children can call Mr. Rhodes at 581-0522 or call the Webster Show and we'll take any information if it's plausible at all. We'll attempt to help in some way if we can. My thanks to you, Mr. Rhodes, for taking the time to come along this morning. I'll show you the pictures once again, but they're old pictures. That's the trouble. You got them handy? Which one is which? Tell me.
Okay, the one on your right
Left. On my right.
is Annette,
And the one on my left,
is Joseph.
Joseph. Thanks very much, Marjorie. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Mr. Rhodes. I'll be back with a free-for-all till the end of the program after the break. I'll take calls on almost any subject between now and the end of the program, but before Marjorie goes, I have a call here from Williams Lake. Do you want to tell me on the air what you told me off the air, ma'am? You don't need to give your name.
Okay, my husband used to work with Joe Shaw, and a few months ago, he called us to find out a phone number of another friend, and he was very vague. He said he was calling from Vancouver, but he wasn't staying in Vancouver. I said, do you have an address, where we could keep in touch? He said, no, I'm still living in California, but all I have is a post office box. And he wouldn't give me the post office box or anything, but he said that he was still in California.
So that was it. And you knew Joe Shaw. Did you know him when he was married to Marjorie?
Well, actually, my husband was one of the ushers at their wedding.
Yeah, you know who it is. You don't need to use a name. How long since he phoned you?
How long ago?
Yeah.
Well, it was before the summer, so I'd say it was April, May, June, something like that. I don't really remember.
And he phoned from Vancouver?
He phoned from Vancouver.
And he wouldn't give you a phone number?
No, he said he was just going to be in Vancouver for a very short time.
Did you know at the time that there was a warrant out for him?
No, I didn't know there was a warrant out for him, but I knew that he had taken off and taken the children with him.
You knew that much. Did you inquire about the children at the time?
No, I didn't. Because, I was very surprised to hear from him in the first place. And, I was just flustered. I didn't know what to say because I didn't know the circumstances, why he took the children or anything. I just knew that he had them.
Can I give Marjorie your phone number?
You sure can.
So that's just 3 or 4 months ago he was in Vancouver, perhaps April, May or June of this year.
Yeah, it was this year for sure.
He didn't say where he was living in California by any chance?
No, he didn't.
Said he only had a post office box in California.
That's right.
Yeah. I wonder, you sent your private, I'm talking to Marjorie now, you sent your private investigator down to California, didn't you?
Yes.
Post office box. And it would seem that he was using his own name, at least to you. He called himself Joe Shaw, did he?
Well, when he called me, but then that's the only name that I know him by, so, you know, it's possible that that's why he used it.
And you, unfortunately, didn't know at the time that he'd run off with the 2 kids.
No, I didn't. I watch your show, you know, occasionally, and I hadn't seen her on your show before.
Well, it's 2 years, and did you recognize her from the wedding this morning?
Did I recognize her?
Yeah.
Actually, I recognized her voice, and then when I looked closer, she looks very different, but I can recognize her, yes.
Well, I'll give your number, which I'm sure I've got right. You double check the number, please. And you can talk to her later on.
That's good.
Thanks. Thanks very much. That's not much of an encouragement for you, except that you know that he's still around. You know that he occasionally comes to Vancouver. And it might be worthwhile to just nag the police again, just in case, if you've information he was in Vancouver, and if for any reason he was stopped by the police. But he's a fairly quiet, otherwise law-abiding chap, is he?
Yes, from what I understand, yes. He wasn't in any trouble when we were together. Mm-hmm. None whatsoever. But his past, I don't have the faintest idea if he'd been in trouble or not before.
How long had you known him before you married him?
A year?
Ask these questions, but I will.
About a year.
Just a youngster at the time. Go ahead, please. Hello.
Jack.
Yeah.
In previous programs, when you were discussing the school situation regarding financing, you alluded to the problem of the untouchables, and yet none of the trustees ever addressed the question. And for example, in the District North Vancouver school system, where they have a superintendent, multi-assistant superintendents, they have a coordinator to coordinate coordinators in schools that they can't afford.
Oh, I know.
Coordinating, and yet none of the trustees nor Bill Vander Zam nor anyone has addressed the question of the expensive, top-heavy administration, and why has not one politician at the trustee level even discussed or commented on the top-heavy cost of administration?
Well, I certainly asked them about it. I didn't get much satisfaction. As a matter of fact, I have asked the department in Victoria for a printout of the numbers and salaries of every administrator in the province of BC, and I can't get one. Well, and I think it's I haven't got it yet anyway. I think it's widely recognized that the whole system is top-heavy with administrators.
Yes, and furthermore, it should be common knowledge, and if it isn't, people should know.
Well, it's
when
there.
The percentage increases come through to the teachers and whatnot, these top-heavy administrators with their high salaries get that too, so that some of them are making more than the premier of the province.
Oh, well, you can't say I haven't done anything about it. $80,000 is not uncommon for a school superintendent.
Right.
And then you've got principals and VPs 1 and VPs 2s, all of whom are non-teaching teachers, have very hefty money indeed. And of course, the person who suffers, and I had a bit of an argument with a woman on the ferry yesterday, she thinks I'm after a classroom teacher. Not at all, but you can't wipe out 15 years of affluent overspending in education by one of Vander Zam's edicts. Everybody has been guilty of not cleaning out the administrator's mess in the school system. And if we knew the score at UBC, it would probably horrify us.
Yes, perhaps people in the forthcoming elections could address this question and ask people who are running for trustees for school boards.
Except I'll give you one quietly cynical remark. Many years ago, I was interviewing a professional mandarin called Bud Drury, who at that time was chairman of the Treasury Board. And I was ranting on, as is my wont, about feather bedding in the civil service. And he said, Mr. Webster, I'll agree there's much feather bedding. But what would we do with all the unemployed if we made the government and the systems efficient? The only difference now is that apparently we can't afford to pay them. That's the difference. But I have not dropped the subject of administrators. And, I don't know.
God help us all, said Tiny Tim.
That's it?
Righto.
Tiny Tim. Was that tiptoe through the tulips or the other Tiny Tim?
Thank you.
He's talking about Dickens' Tiny Tim. Go ahead, please. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Am I on the air?
Yes, ma'am.
It's about the Shaw case. I may be too late for that now, but I wonder, did you show a picture of the husband?
No. Do we have a picture of the husband?
I don't.
It occurred to me that it might be a help.
That was pretty elementary. Do we have a picture of the husband here? Haven't got one. Sorry. Describe him.
He's about 6'2",
Mm-hmm.
blonde hair,
Mhm.
very muscular in the shoulders.
Mhm.
He's got fair skin.
And the kids are both blondes.
That's right. And he's blonde.
It's the best I can do for you, love. Thank you very much. Go ahead, please. Hello. Where are you?
Oh, me?
That's you, yes.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I'd gotten through so fast.
Mhm.
On the topic of the schools, I'm beginning to wonder. I disagree with the amount of salaries that people are being paying, but I don't feel that they really are clapping back on the essentials. I feel that we ought to have more reading, writing, and arithmetic, and less cooking and kung fu and computer programming. They're not the basic necessities of life. And somewhere along the line, the schools have lost the basic necessities of life.
Yeah, I think computer programming is becoming very close to a basic necessity of life for an intelligent student, but kung fu is certainly not.
Well, I know that I have a cousin who is going to the Port Moody School, and they are most upset because she has lost her class on how to gourmet cook, which is totally irrelevant because
You mean the night
you can't
school?
add without a calculator.
The night school thing.
No, this is a day program.
She's lost the which school?
Port Moody Secondary.
How old is she?
13.
And she's lost her gourmet cooking class.
That's right.
Oh, isn't that bleeding tragic?
It really is, as I say, and she is unable to add without a calculator. So, you know, when she gets growing up, I can't see any way that the child is going to be able to balance
All I want to
checkbook
know is, can computers spell?
or just have the basic life skills. Somewhere along the line, they've goofed.
Oh, I know that. Thanks, ma'am. Go ahead from Richland, Washington.
Mr. Webster,
Yes, sir.
about 4 or 5 years ago, I
Uh-huh.
started watching these hockey broadcasts.
Uh-huh.
And, well, I got hooked. Started watching the Canucks and got hooked. And last year, they started doing good. And playoffs roll around, and we don't see the hockey games. Didn't see a single playoff game last year. I know it's not your jurisdiction, but screw you to the guys in high places.
Didn't we see hockey games? Hockey playoffs? We saw hockey playoffs. What are you talking about?
No, we did not see them.
Why not?
I don't know.
We carried the CBC and ourselves carried the playoffs.
I have no idea. We have the CTV cable.
Do you mean to say you get me on the cable in Richland, Washington?
Yeah, we do.
Isn't that a repulsive thought?
Repulsive?
Yeah. Well, tell me it's a good program, you slow-witted nit.
What's that?
I'm only pulling your leg. Thanks for your call, and keep watching me on the cable in Richland. Where is Richland? Where is it?
Mr. Webster.
Where is it? Hold on, don't go away. After the break. We have so too got a picture of Joseph Shaw. Here it is, Marjorie's former husband. He's got the 2 children, probably in California. If you know where he is, give us a call. Tomorrow morning, I suppose the star of the show in his own blistering manner will be Alan Frothingham, Malice in Blunderland, or How the Grit Stole Christmas, among other things, tomorrow on Webster at 9 a.m. precisely. I'm going. Maureen McTeer on Webster Uncheck at midnight, precisely. The famous Foth on Webster at 9 a.m. precisely. The infamous Fotheringham on Webster at 9 a.m. precisely.